If you want to decrease your risk of injury on the mat so that you're not hurting your knees, your hips, your shoulders, or your neck in wrestling or jiu-jitsu, you're going to want to listen to these 3 tips. Let's discuss. What's going on, guys? My name is Josh Settlage. I am the BJJ strength coach, and today we're going to talk about the 3 things you need to be doing to help decrease your overall risk of injury on the mat. Here's the deal. In wrestling and jiu-jitsu, we're going to get banged up. It's a very competitive, it's a very abrasive sport, and it's a combat sport. So we're going to get banged up a little bit. You're going to get your nicks and knacks. Here's the thing. We want to do everything we can to decrease our overall risk of injury so that we don't get caught with a sidelining injury that's going to take us off the mat, take us out of competition, and prevent us from doing what we love, which is jiu-jitsu and wrestling. But before we dive into it, I want to invite you guys to sign up for the newsletter. In this newsletter, every single week, you're going to get fresh workouts that are specifically and carefully designed by a boy that are going to be perfect for grappling athletes, whether that's wrestling or jiu-jitsu. Every week, you're going to get new workouts designed to make you stronger, more explosive, more powerful, better conditioned, and less likely to get injured. If you're interested in signing up for the newsletter, you can click the link below in the description. When you sign up for the newsletter through the link below, you're also gonna get a free 4-week strength program that I've designed for you. So definitely check that out, and let's go and dive right into it. Getting injured in wrestling or jiu-jitsu freaking sucks. Not being able to do what we love and having to sit off on the sidelines, or even worse, sit out in the bleachers of competition, not being able to compete in wrestling or jiu-jitsu. It's one of the worst feelings of all time. And if you're able to do these 3 things effectively, I can't guarantee that you're never going to get injured, but I'll guarantee that your risk of injury is going to go down significantly. The first thing that you need to do is just warm up properly. All too often, people aren't warming up the right way. I see it happen all the time. A lot of times at jiu-jitsu, you go to jiu-jitsu right after work. That's awesome that you're still getting your training in. But if you don't take just about 10 minutes, dude, just take 10 minutes to spend a little bit more time on your warm-up, that's significantly gonna decrease the risk of injury. A couple things you can do in your warm-up is just to work through some active mobility exercises, things like the 90-90 hip drill. The shin box get up. You can even bring a band to jiu-jitsu and off on the side of the mat, do a couple band pull-aparts. You could do some face pulls. If you're just able to take 10 minutes tops, not even 10 minutes. You could probably get this done in about 6 to 7 minutes. If you just take 6 to 7 minutes before you get to jiu-jitsu, or right when you get to jiu-jitsu, before you start rolling hard, just take 6 to 7 minutes to loosen things up. You're gonna wanna warm up your neck, your shoulders, get some core activation in there as well. Work your lower back a little bit, engage your glutes and your hamstrings, and make sure you get lots of blood flow going through your knees and your ankles. If you do a quick 6 to 7 minute full body warm up before you do jiu-jitsu, you're really gonna significantly decrease your overall risk of injury. And the same applies for you wrestlers too. I know in wrestling, a lot of times you go through a big warm up as a team. That's great, but the warm up before the warm up should also be taken into consideration as well. And that's actually gonna be tip number 2, which is gonna be mobility work. If you wanna significantly decrease your overall risk of injury, you need to be mobile. Now, I'm not talking about flexibility. I'm not talking about if you can do the splits. I'm not talking about if you can touch your toes. Those things are great. If you can do the splits, awesome. I envy you. If you can't touch your toes, awesome. I can touch my toes, so I don't envy you, but good for you. The difference between flexibility and mobility, and why mobility is much more important and significant when it comes to decreasing your risk of injury, is flexibility is great. You can have a flexible muscle. You can have flexible hamstrings, which means you can stretch them and touch your toes. You can pull on them, and they're very flexible and supple. Mobility is different. Mobility refers to your ability to move into a certain position, stabilize that position, receive force or produce force from that position, and move out of that position. Now, what are we talking about? So let's look at an example of the squat. Good squat mobility refers to your ability to not only move down into the bottom of the squat with control, but be able to be stable in that position. If you're not stable in the bottom of a squat, and if I just tap on your shoulder and you fall over, you got some trash mobility, bro. So you want to be able to move into a certain position and be stable from that position, while also being able to receive force and produce force. And what do I mean by force? You just want to be able to do it under a little bit of load. So if you're squatting with some weight and at the bottom, you can stabilize that position with that weight in your hand or with that weight on your back. Awesome. And then you also want to be able to come out of that position and produce force, which means standing up from the bottom of a squat. You want to be working on some sort of mobility training before you get to wrestling, before you get to jiu-jitsu, or even just a couple minutes on the side of the mat before you get started. Some of my favorite mobility exercises are going to be things that are more considered active mobility exercises because they're really easy to fit within your warm-up. Some of them we talked about already: 90-90 hip drill, the shin box get up. You could even do some lunges with a little bit of a stretch. And then also, if you are able to just to bring a band, there's a lot of passive stretches that you can do that'll help you be a little bit more mobile when it's time for you to start warming up for wrestling, or it's time for you to get to jiu-jitsu and start rolling. The third and final thing that you need to be doing to help decrease your overall risk of injury is going to be to get stronger. I've talked about it 100 times already on this channel. Nobody ever lost a jiu-jitsu or wrestling match because they were too strong, and nobody ever got injured because they were too strong. The stronger you are, the more resilient you're gonna be. If you're in wrestling, the goal of wrestling is to take your opponent down, slam them on the mat, turn their shoulders over, and pin them there in front of their mom. And if you're in jiu-jitsu, the sport of jiu-jitsu is not designed to test who can run fastest, who can lift the most, who can put a ball in a basket the quickest. It's not about that. It's about grabbing your opponent, getting past their legs, grabbing onto some sort of appendage, whether it's their leg, their arm, or their neck, and breaking it in half or squeezing it so tight that blood stops going to their brain. That's the goal of jiu-jitsu, and wrestling is very similar in its destructiveness towards the human body. And it's because we're in these really intense sports that are designed to damage your opponent, and oftentimes injuries spawn from that, we have to make sure that our bodies are resilient enough and strong enough to withstand not only the training that we do for these sports, but also the competition aspect of these sports. So it's very important that you incorporate at least a minimum of about 2 days a week dedicated to strength training. That doesn't mean that on those days you can't go to jiu-jitsu or you can't wrestle. You absolutely can. You just have to have the right workouts that are organized in a very specific way that allow you to get stronger, build more muscle, decrease your overall risk of injury, while also not taking away from your wrestling training or your jiu-jitsu training. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys tuning into this video. If you're interested about how you can learn more about strength training for jiu-jitsu and wrestling, I encourage you guys to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Joshua Settlage. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. I really appreciate you guys watching this video and helping me spread the word about strength training for grappling athletes. If you guys have questions about building strength for wrestling and jiu-jitsu, be sure to drop them in the comments below. I'm gonna get back to everybody to make sure your questions are answered, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.